So, good afternoon, the audience, and welcome to this very interesting panel discussion about the startup and corporate partnership, the practical guide. So I'm very excited, to have you all here, and then we really have interesting my colleagues we're going to be discussing. My name is Julius Norkūnas, and I work for Mobility Innovation Center, where we're established by the free public transport companies here in Lithuania, and we help them to find innovation solutions. And my colleagues will be joining from all over the places, and I'm very interested to hear, what's happening in the field, especially in the current circumstances. So today I'm joining together with Remco Temmink from our own group. So welcome, Remco, and maybe just a few words what you do.
Yeah, hello, Julius. Good to be here today in this panel discussion. My name is Remco. I work at a known group, which is a global innovation agency based in the Netherlands. And we support startups from 1 to 100 million in value. And we do that by a couple of activities. But one of them is supporting corporates with corporate challenges and finding the best startups that could help them with innovative solutions.
Perfect. The next speaker is Carolina Alex from 27 Pilots. Welcome, Carolina. We can't hear her, I think. There you go.
Okay, great. Hi there, I'm Carolina, based in Munich. Thank you very much for having me here in this very international call today and this panel discussion. I'm one of the founders of 27 Pilots. What we do is that we set up and operate venture client units for our corporate partners. Maybe I'll be able to explain a little bit what that is later. And we also founded the Startups Against Corona initiative, which basically tries to connect corporates that have problems with startups that have solutions in this crisis.
Perfect. Thank you, Carolina. And the next speaker is Joni Lehto from city of Helsinki. So, Joni, hi.
Ačiū, Julius. Labą dieną, Lietuva. I work for the Norkūnas Helsinki. It's a part of the city of Helsinki. We're the startup support unit. And what I do day by day is that I coach and connect startups, investors, corporations, and others. So people like Julius who connect startups and organizations in Lithuania. I do similar in Finland. And we do cross-cooperation to make sure that Finnish startups and investors find Lithuanian startups and investors and corporations.
Perfect. Thank you, Joni. And the next speaker we have is from Israel, is Itay Erel from Drive Tel Aviv. Hi, Itay.
Hi, Julius. Very nice to meet you and be here with all these colleagues. So I'm based in Tel Aviv. I'm part of the Drive TLV. It's an innovation hub for smart mobility. We're connecting top Israeli startups with leading corporates from the field of mobility, such as Honda, Volvo Car, Volvo Group, Cox Automotive, and others. And we help them work together and hopefully to do some work and establish a commercialization program or agreement.
Great. Thanks, Itay. And then we have their representative from the local ecosystem. It's Arvydas from Pleta from Katalista Ventures. Hi, Arvydas.
Hi, everyone. It's super nice to be here with you, all of you, with so many innovation hubs, cities around the world. So yeah, I'm passionate about corporate innovation, actually, and I started from corporate side and worked in a bank as innovation manager for more than 5 years. And then I jumped into the startup world, worked in a startup, and now I'm a moderator, I would say, and joined Katalista Ventures. And we are helping corporates and SMEs to implement innovation projects by connecting them to startups and other opportunities as well. So we had lots of customers. Most of them are Lithuanian companies, some of them are international, so including lots of different segments as well. So it's super nice to be here, and it will be interesting to discuss with you and compare what we have here in Lithuania with what we have in other cities in the world.
Great, thanks, Arvydas. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, to have such an international, the roundtable discussion about these startups and corporate partnerships. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of, them experiences and maybe the good practices, what works, what's not, and how maybe to evolve, especially. And I think everybody has a good kind of a new kickstart. So just to remind for all the audience that this is a discussion of one of their Startup Fair Challenge 2020 online sessions. And today we're just discussing about the startup and corporate partnerships. So of course, everybody has been affected, there after the COVID virus and the lockdown. So maybe let's start, with the question. So what's happening right now? Do you see any changes in the projects? How is the partnership between the corporate and startups changing right now, especially, in these circumstances? So maybe let's start with Remco from Unknown Group.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, of course, I think Corona and COVID-19 is affecting a lot of companies around, and what it creates is uncertainty for many organizations. And of course, uncertainty is always difficult because then you don't know what the future will look like. And that's what we see, that a lot of projects are partly postponed or put on hold for some time. But I think now that you see that there's already some room coming for new initiatives, and you also see that depending on the sector also, new initiatives are again growing and getting back up to speed. Where I want to emphasize on one thing is that you see that a lot of corporates mainly pay attention now to the relationships with startups they already have, instead of maybe starting a lot of new ones at this point.
Okay. Very interesting. Itay, what's happening in Israel? What's your perspective?
Yeah, Remco pretty much said it pretty much all. But yeah, we saw lack of response, between, startups and corporates. The corporates, some of them they had a longer response time, pure the COVID. After that, we saw that no new engagement, as Remco said, only all the new projects. What we saw that also, but the key, the word is positive ROI. The corporates look for to find some solution to their urgent problems. Due the COVID-19. I will give you an example. We have a lot of buses, a lot of trucks we've been shut down. And what happened then when they are in the garage and also a private vehicle, their battery is dead after 10 days. And it's very expensive, especially for buses and trucks. So we have a startup in Israel called Apollo Power that they have a magnet panel for solar panel, and you put it and you plug it to the battery, and it saves the battery. So during the first week of the COVID, we've been shipping a lot of the panels to Europe, to the US, since we saw this challenge. And this company didn't have any engagement with big corporates before, and only because of that they solved the problem, and we call it the positive ROI in the project. They saw that in the minute they're spending a few dozens of dollars, they're saving a battery that cost $500. This is something that was working very well, and that's this is two new points from our side, and yeah.
Great, yeah. I think just very interesting to learn that for somebody that arises in new opportunities, right? Carolina, what's happening in your field?
I think I definitely have to agree with Itay that actually things became much quicker. So I don't think that the corporates react slower at the moment. On the contrary, I think they react much quicker if the solution is relevant and solves a critical problem. And I think with Startups Against Corona, we started this platform about 3 months ago. And in the meanwhile, we have more than 60 organizations on the platform, and really corporates from all industries, let it be health, automotive, retail, food industry, everything. And they all very, very much interested in the solutions at the moment, but really for pressing problems that are directly related to COVID-19 challenges, or also digitization. So we did see that already. We did see a push for particular digitization topics at some corporates. So that now that that they really see what problems they have if they didn't digitize their business in a crisis like this really gives room for them to work on this now. That's one thing, and the other thing is that another interesting learning we had was that even some of the business units, they have more time at the moment because for example some production lines are closed in some countries or something like that. So this is also time where they can have a look at how do I improve my processes and so on. But of course, what we also see on the other side, what was mentioned in the beginning, that projects that are not solving an urgent challenge at the moment or don't have a positive business case, more than ever, they are canceled at the moment and they are deprioritized. So it's really, really more than ever important than focus on the KPIs and focus on the impact that the solution have and emphasize this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think what we hear is focus and just solve today's problem rather than tomorrow's. Okay, what's happening in Helsinki, Joni? What's your take?
Yeah, so first to set the context with the VCs instead of corporations to begin with. If you're applying for VC funding right now, if your solution is corona-proof, they're more interested than before. Then again, some solutions suffered directly from the corona, so those are currently a no-go. And then there's a huge amount of solutions in the middle that are maybe surviving corona well, but they cannot tell. So all the VCs have taken a time out to see how the wind blows. Okay. And when it comes to corporations, they're not interested in so much whether the startup is corona-proof. They're interested in whether the startup helps the corporation be more corona-proof. So for every solution that currently, for example, contactless paying and these kind of solutions, there is increased interest, and the corporations are faster to act on those, as previous commenters said. But everything else that is not corona-proof or is unclear, the response times are generally longer.
Okay, great. Okay, and Arvydas, what's happening here in the local ecosystem? Do you see any changes?
I think I do. I mean, one thing to admit here that we are quite a young market, I would say, and seeing all the guests here, and then we're usually comparing what's happening in other countries. So one thing which we noticed even before the coronavirus, that it was not so kind of clear and not so good path. I mean, on corporate and startup communication and partnership. I mean, and one of the reasons is that probably the corporates in Lithuania are rather small compared to kind of probably corporates in Germany or in Israel or even in Helsinki. And the next thing, I mean, it was kind of economy was booming and lots of corporates were saying, come on, I mean, we are doing quite well. I mean, we don't need any new solutions. We don't need to innovate. I mean, we are having good sales. So now the situation has changed. And actually, I think that, compared these two things, that, we were kind of a rather young market and that, we now are in demand of new solutions. So right now, I mean, corporates are looking, much more to the startup side. And, to be honest, I mean, usually what's, at least in the beginning and the first steps of cooperating, usually it's even cheaper for corporate, which is also quite important today because they don't need to buy kind of fancy solutions and pay, lots of money in advance. So I guess that it's a perfect kind of opportunity for our local system. And I would, encourage startups to be, braver here. And to knock the corporate kind of windows, because I know that we have lots of good solutions. And at the same time, from corporate side, they also need to kind of be embraced as well here. And I know that also Startup Lithuania is launching a new also project to encourage corporates also to kind of partnership with startups, and we will also be a part of that. So I guess that it's a perfect time for this. So this is good news, I guess, for Lithuanian market.
Great. I think what we see for probably not necessarily particular applied to Lithuanian market. I think it's going to be all wider in Europe and globally. That all the companies will start focusing more on efficiency and the KPIs, how to deliver more value. So, but that's already touched a little bit. The second question is so what are the benefits for the corporate and for the startup partner to partner? So it's actually two angles. So maybe let's start with Carolina. You are a really great spin-off from BMW Startup Garage, and now you're on your new journey. So what the benefits you see from two angles?
Yeah. So I mean, what we usually see from startups, what they want from a client is from a corporate is two things. They either want a client or they want to be acquired, or in both. And on the corporate side, on the other side, everything is about or mostly it's about the solution. They need solutions to solve their problems. And ultimately, it's all about gaining a competitive advantage. So in the end, they need a solution that can help them to increase their revenue or decrease their cost. And that's ultimately what these both parties want, talking about top startups and the normal case of a corporate.
Okay. Itay, what's your take here, and how do you manage to convince, the value for the big automotive, players?
I fully agree with Carolina. We know that the big corporates, for example, the R&D, they have 700 problems they need to solve in a year. But actually, the manpower is, they can handle 400, for example. And the rest of the 300, they need help. And I think in the last years, as Carolina mentioned, all the big corporates understand that they can't win everything and they need some support and help and competitive advantage because it's very dynamic field today. And from the other side, startups, they're looking for credibility and proof of concept, actually that their product is working. And a big company wants to use their products, then eventually somebody will acquire them, I hope. But everybody understands, that you can't win everything by yourself. You can see it also in big corporates that they're starting to work together. The big competitive of, big OEMs are starting to work together. This is something that never happened in past, it's very popular now, common in the last year or two. Especially of moving fast for the EV world and also the autonomous. It's very expensive to build that. So yeah, that's from my perspective.
Okay, great, thanks, Itay. And Remco, you run the kind of global operation, so.
Yeah, I think I want to start from a corporate side, and it's also what Carolina is saying. Like especially in these times, if you can stay relevant as a startup and as a corporate, you need to stay relevant. It are really the startups that can provide that agility and that technology very, very quickly in the market. So they don't have that corporate governance structure to rely on, but they can pivot quickly. They can just adjust, and that is really valuable, especially for corporates in these times, to work with startups. And of course, on the other hand, I think most important things are already mentioned, but startups are really looking for a strong network of a corporate, and that can either be like a market combination, or it can be also the knowledge, of course, that a corporate has, the capital. In the end, that there are all components that are needed for a startup to grow towards the future.
Okay. And Joni, do the companies in Finland look for the same things, or maybe some other angles?
Yeah, I think my internet cut off for a second there, so I may have missed a couple of things. So I hope I'm not repeating the same. But generally speaking, the corporations are really good at standardizing things and operating at economies of scale. So they're often really good at executing what they have decided to do, and they perfect something over the years. Whereas the strength from startups is often thinking of completely new approaches, completely new ways of doing things. And if you look at, for example, Silicon Valley, quite many corporations, you could say that they have outsourced their innovation to startups. And we see the same here. Corporations do some innovation, but the best and most forward-looking corporations are always looking for startups to integrate with, either to buy or to buy from, as Anna said.
Okay. Arvydas, do you see same here in Lithuania?
Yeah, I can just support probably your colleagues. Yeah, it's similar. It just maybe few kind of differences as usually we are working with quite small corporates, I would say, and quite early stage startups working together. So usually we see kind of for the startups, one of the biggest benefit we see is attraction. So usually, they need some first kind of good success cases, and these are the ways why corporate wants to, startups want to be with corporate. Also, we need some development partner sometimes, because we might have a very nice and good technology, but to finish that or to have, kind of a working thing as well. And also connections and brand, which is also quite important. Yeah. From corporate side, one of the things which probably all the colleagues said as well is a fresh view and kind of new way of doing things, because usually corporate itself can't do that on their own. The next thing, at least here in Lithuania, it's also possibility to save money. Usually, if we talk about any solutions, there are some of them already in the market. But if you want to buy them, it's quite expensive, and companies are choosing kind of to partnership with, startup and recreate it and adjust it to their personal needs. And the third thing, it's partnership as well. So some of the corporates kind of using the startup thing for leveraging partnership and showing as well to community what they are kind of good at that, and also showing that they are ready to innovate. So this is also what we see here in Lithuania.
Okay, so we see that, here, the few things, and one of them was mentioned, the corporates looking for the way maybe just, to minimize the cost rather than to buy it from the big companies or big suppliers. But at the same time, you have the risk, because, and I'm just touching, the meaning of the startup. The startup can be for some companies, maybe just a bunch of students, just starting with the idea. And for some of them can be our medium-sized, decent company raised, 10, 20 million, dollars already capital and really up and running. So what's the situation about the stages of the startups, and what actually corporates looking for? Maybe, Itay, we can start from your side.
Yeah, so they all say they want early stage, but the reality is, if it's about software, cyber, they're looking for much more mature companies that actually have some products, and if somebody else tested before, that's better. If it's more deep technology, longer term, we saw that early stage is also very common. But as much as we're involving also in Drive TLV, we realize that corporates, the big corporates, likes to work with some traction. The company is not coming only with slides and a demo, but they're coming with actually product. And we're trying now to also to push forward for that kind of company. We also involved in that. So that's my take.
Okay, Carolina, what's your experience?
Going to the same direction. The minimum thing that a startup should have is a prototype, a working prototype, something that the corporate or the development department can work with, and also some funding, because neither the corporate nor the startups wants to pay for the development at an early stage of the collaboration, because what that would ultimately mean is that you get into IP conflicts. So you need an investor to pay the development of your solution. And then I think it was interesting what was just said, that it depends on the technology. I agree, but I think it also depends a lot on the corporate itself, and particularly the department of the corporate. Is this a typical early adopting corporate, or is it someone who's more the laggard type? And is this particular department an early adopting department? So, for example, looking at staying in the automotive industry, looking at BMW, it's an absolutely innovator when it comes to when it comes to autonomous driving, for example. So they would probably also work with a startup that is very early stage, has some funding and a first workable prototype, which is some new sensor technology. But, and this is not bulletproof, I'm not sure about the HR department, but let's say the HR department is maybe more a department that is not so innovative in this big corporate. And they would probably, when collaborating with startups, wanting to collaborate with a startup that is mature, that has a lot of clients, that has a finished product. They don't want to be involved in any product development or something like that. So I think this is, it really depends a lot on the corporate and the department of the corporate. And I wanted to add like one more thing to the previous discussion we had about we had about cost saving, because this is something that is usually not mentioned in panels like that, and I like to talk about that. Somebody mentioned that it's probably sometimes cheaper to buy from a startup than to buy from an incumbent company. And I would even state that usually the question is not can be incumbent, but it can be also, do I develop it myself? And very often, in both cases, it can be much cheaper to work with a startup. And very often, a startup might have even more resources to do that, because often people state, "Oh, startups they don't have resources, they need help, and so on." But a good funded startup has much more money to develop a very particular niche problem than any OEM, for example, has. So I think that's a very interesting point to mention, that one reason why corporates work with startups is because they have more money.
That's very true, very true. Remco, what stage startups your customers normally looks for, and then and what to do with the early stage startups, once you don't have traction?
Yeah, good question. I think at our company, we always look first at indeed what is the problem and what is the department, the sector that this company or this corporate is in. And based on that, we try to go into discussions. What is the solution that you're looking for, and what is the problem that you have? And based on that, we are going to think together about what is the best fitted startup for such a problem. So it is really an iterative process where we together come to like the ideal startup for a problem. Then, of course, we're going to look into the market and we're going to see what is there. And again, if a startup wants to, or a corporate wants to invest at some point, they have to take into consideration what will be the costs, etc. So there's not one answer for that. I think the second question you asked, Julius, what was it?
So how the early stage, startups can find the pathway, to grow to the corporate, where they can have these customers.
Yeah. Like I said, we have a couple of corporates we work for constantly, and I think as a startup, you have to think, what is a good corporate for me to work with, and again, what is the problem that I'm solving for the corporate? So I cannot say that you shouldn't go to this corporate or you shouldn't go to that one. For instance, we work also a lot with governments. Governments, a lot of times with their startup in residence programs, for instance, are looking for quite early stage startups. And then a government can be a launching customer. I think that's also what Carolina is talking about a lot. So that might be an option if you're early stage and if you're looking for traction in the market.
Okay. Joni, maybe you can add on, from government perspective.
Yeah, regarding both governments and corporations, there's basically two opposite ends when it comes to startups and selling innovations. You can imagine that a corporation, government, any big entity, they have a huge amount of processes to make sure that everything works well with their own system. Every corporation has a little bit different system. So if you think of entering from the outside, it's kind of like they have these interlocking gates that you have to go through. First, you have to make sure that one party is convinced, and then it fits this process and that process and that process. Regarding this, there's two ways to enter. One is where the corporation has identified that they have a need and they start looking for the solution. There's programs like Combine Foundry that is managed by Stora Enso, Kone, and a couple of other organizations. It's basically a corporate accelerator. And they work in the model that they identify what they need, then they do the pre-work for you. for the startups. They make sure that all their processes are ready to take in a solution of this kind. So in that case, the solution doesn't need to be fully ready yet. It can be a little bit earlier stage. So you can follow the website Combine Foundry and other sources to find corporate challenges. And when you find that corporation has already defined a challenge, you can apply with a little bit earlier stage on average. It varies by case to case. Then the other end of the spectrum is that you're approaching the corporation kind of out of the blue. They haven't identified yet that there's a need for this. They haven't opened the call about it. You're just knocking on their door that, hey, I have this solution. Would you want to buy? And that's a rougher road. Still, a lot of startups go forward this way. Just your solution has to be a little bit more ready at that point. In both cases, you could say that the sweet spot on the corporations I worked with, it's around the same as what Anna said. You should have a working prototype. In some cases, you may be able to approach with an idea, but the discussions are often quite short. So they say, yes, this is interesting for us, but let's talk more when you have the technology working. The way I define the stages is first that you have an idea of that something could work. Then you have a proof of concept that it's technically possible. And then you make a prototype that is already usable, but very rough around the edges. And based on that, you later make a ready product for the market. So the prototype where the corporation can already start working with that and starting to integrate that with their solutions, that's the sweet spot.
Okay. So let's move on to the next question, and let's share some maybe experiences, from your perspective. So what partnership model, the best works for you guys or maybe for your customers? So how the corporates, should, evolve, we touch a couple of already examples, maybe, just more money, maybe faster solutions, and etc. So Itay, what's your experience?
This is what we do in Drive TLV. This is for the long-term relationship, working with both sides, with the startups and corporates. And what we're helping them, I will give you an example. One of our startups work with Volvo cars. The startup is called the UVI. And so in the beginning, we did the introduction and we emphasized, the solution of UVI is scanning cars. They started in the Homeland Security, scanning cars from bombs in the bottom of the cars. And they've been involved after a year to scan all the car. On the other side, we've been talking with Volvo cars, and we realized that today, after the vehicle is finished in the factory, there is 3 people that scan the car for a minute and a half to see if there is scratches, to see if all the screws are in the place. So we combined the solution of on the other side of UVI together with the problem of Volvo, and for the last 6 months. Their product is inside of the factory in Sweden, in Gothenburg, and scanning every car that finished the manufacture, the line. And in that process, it started from the introduction and understanding, the problem from both sides. I think my colleagues mentioned that. It's super important because if there is not a problem, no matter what solution you have, it doesn't matter. In the way we've been helping them with the POC. Sometimes we've been Google Translator with our Israeli startup rudeness sometimes. On the other side, the Swedish are very polite, and things in corporate taking, sometimes it was a fast project for 10 months. It's very fast in the mobility area. But we've been in the middle. Sometimes, as I mentioned, Google Translate. Sometimes we've been helping them in negotiating the details, and sometimes I've been in the phone with the head of the factory together with the head of the product, with both sides, and try to solve some problem. So we've been involving in that project from A to Z and we continue monitoring it and try to replicate this long-term relationship, because in the second that there is a startup corporate relationship, a commercialization agreement, if everything is working, they will want to do it again and to put it in other factories. And what we saw in that project, that other OEMs and other companies, corporates, saw this engagement. And the second that was successful, they've been asking, to come along and and join and putting their product in their factories. So that's from both sides that we develop the relationship, and it's a long-term relationship. There is not a short-term relationship in our area.
Okay, Carolina, I know you already tried many ways as well, for your approach. What's works best for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we left me and my co-founders, we left BMW more than 2 years ago now, because we established at a BMW Startup Garage, which is what we call the first venture client unit. And we just saw that it works and that it makes so much sense. And that's why we found 27 pilots to make this model really, really big and available for the whole market. So my answer is definitely the venture client model. And in the essence, what Itay just described is exactly what this venture client model is about. It's when you create an own dedicated unit within a corporate, like for example the BMW Startup Garage, that focuses on onboarding startups as a supplier in a very scalable, efficient way. Here we are again with processes. So if you one time think through the whole process, is how can I make the problem definition easy? How can I make the sourcing easy? How do I evaluate the startups? How do I make them with the business units? How do I set up a pilot project? How do I manage a pilot project? What do I do afterwards? So how do I scale the solution afterwards within the whole corporate, and so on? And we thought this through and tried it a lot of times and perfectionized it and developed the tools and processes to make this in a scalable way. And this is also actually what the Combient Foundry does. It's a venture client consortium, I would say, and we also in contact with them. And besides the BMW Startup Garage, we founded the LH Startup Maker, which is in the construction materials industry, one of the biggest player in cement. And we also work with Bosch in the automotive industry, and we work with BSH in the home appliances industry. We're also working with an insurer. So it's a very broad industry-wise, and we see that it works for all of them very well.
Great. Okay. And Arvydas, you tried other ways as well, the hackathon with the basketball team, Žalgiris, and other methods. What works, guys, for you best?
Yeah, thank you, Julius. I want to start actually with even, a bit remark for the previous question about startup stages. So, what we see is that in the beginning, every company, every corporate is speaking about, startup with traction and possibility to deliver as soon as possible. But in reality, what we at least see that usually corporates require some kind of unique solution, at least they want in the beginning. So every startup, at least in our case, needs to adapt. And in that case, if a startup is quite later stage, it's quite hard for them to adapt. So what we see that usually, the willingness is most important. So as long as startup wants to change something and wants to kind of, get into the corporate, it's easy. It's even easier for earlier stage sometimes to kind of have the end product delivery rather than later on, if we are not ready to sacrifice anything. And regarding the models, what we see, from our kind of cooperation, that most wanted model from startups is usually to sell to corporates, just to come and sell it as a regular commodity. And for corporates, usually maybe it's only here, they want to get a solution almost for free, just for sake of brand traction and so on. And when these two kind of models are meeting together, usually it's a bit of clash. So what is happening in reality and what's kind of our kind of best experience here is still kind of for startup is to give something still for free or for quite a big discount, but to use corporate as a playground and leverage on a user base to scale. And corporate is actually searching for a reliable partner for many years. And I agree with other speakers here. So in the beginning for startup, it might seem that, it's long journey. Maybe it's not worth it to sacrifice so many things. But, for all the startups properly, as soon as you are in the corporate, you are in for a long time. So usually it's worth to invest this time and to be in, and then you can, upsell, I would say. So first of all, that's kind of how we see. And from even our hackathons and other activities we do, we see that in the beginning, all the corporates are speaking, let's find, the team with traction, let's find team with, big experience and so on. But later on, we understand that if we need to create something, we need people who are willing to create. That's the main important thing. And of course, funding needs to be there as well. But today's funding is not a problem, I guess, in kind of, place in the world.
Okay, we'll come back to the funding models a little bit later. Remco, what's your take? You even run kind of a global startup competition, and what's your best, partnership models do you see?
Yeah, we indeed run such a competition, and what we see and what we believe in is that one, managing expectations is very important on both sides, but two, when you are in it for long term, you have to start working somehow. So we believe that starting a pilot together is very valuable. And then as a second step, it can result in different things. For instance, like Carolina was saying, the venture client, the launching customer, that can be a step. But of course, it can also lead to an investment or an acquisition, or maybe a joint venture together, or a research project. So I wouldn't say that there is one good thing. But in the end, one advice that I would like to give is don't put all your eggs as a startup in one basket, because you have to spread your chances there. And sometimes, although it might look very promising, and it can be promising, it is also the long run. And if it takes 2 or 3 years to get that traction and to get that customer, then funding might be a challenge at some point. And I see the others knocking as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Remco. Very, very interesting. And I just want to elaborate, I think, what you touched in the beginning here, and then the answer, managing the expectations between the startups and the corporates. One of them very slow and complex, and the other is very fast and eager to sell tomorrow. Joni, let's start for this question for you. How do you see the expectations management?
It varies with depending corporations. So if you think about, for example, if you were selling touchscreens back in the day before nobody used them, if you were selling them to Nokia, they were not interested. So you couldn't do anything. If you sold them to Google, same thing. But it was Apple who was at that point, they wanted to leapfrog the competition to do something that nobody else was doing. So if you happened to sell to Apple, you were in luck. And after Apple did it, then Google wanted to do it and others. And Nokia was actually one of the latest, even though they were the first with many other features before. So it's very case by case basis. So if you're looking to sell something that is really different from the current solutions, that changes the paradigm of how we think about the product, then I don't think there's anything better than really going through them one by one. If you can get some organization to help you along the way, like we have here as other panelists, that's going to be great. But in case, like some organizations, they work so that the corporation first tells them what they want. And if your product is not something the corporation already knows that they can want, then you have to just go by your own.
Okay. Itay, what's your experience in sharing, these expectations, and managing the expectations? And maybe just to put another more question, is there a standard in the market, how long, should happen this collaboration before, let's say, the first sale, acquisition, where that can happen?
There is not a standard, but I would say that it's going to take some time. But first of all, I think, as I see it for the corporate, and before they're starting, to engage with startups, and they want to invest in innovation, and they can do it in some few ways. They can invest in platform that will connect them to community, to startups, with knowledge, as what we're doing in Israel. I know that there is Mobility X Lab in Sweden. This kind of platform, they need to put some money. A lot of the time, projects is stuck because there is not the money for the POC, or there is some struggling to get some budget. So what we saw that some of the corporates actually are putting on the side some budget for small POCs that they're putting on one KPI, and this is to put the foot on the door. And the second the POC is running very fast, it's no more than a few weeks, then they can move on to a bigger or later stage POC. So that's something that we also we saw, and also a lot of the corporates putting money in VCs, corporate VCs. These VCs are combining the field, if the operation and the factory and the R&D people actually wants to work with this company and they think this product is useful, this is the way for them to put to invest in the company and maybe to acquire it later stage. But this is a vehicle for them to not just to do a POC or to test their, but also to invest money very early stage before all the big players are there, because they know the value of the solution. They know there is a problem. They're using it. So that's this is what we saw from our side.
Great, thanks. I think we will come back to the corporate venture capitalists in a minute and the acquisition thing. Carolina, what's your experience of managing the expectations between two sides?
Yeah. So our experience is that from the corporate side, we work with the engineers and so on, with the departments that really need the solution, and we never had complaints about the startups being too quick and too flexible and too innovative. So there's no problem on that side actually. On the other side, the startups that we work with, they are, if you decide as a startup, you are a B2B startup and your clients are corporates, then you must know about how long is in the sales cycle usually, and how long the process can take, and so on and so forth. So we also don't have to manage expectations there. On the contrary, usually because our process is very transparent and we keep the startups up to date and so on, we get positive feedback from the startups. But you have to know as a startup in the B2B business that sales cycles are really long and that decision taking can take long because it's a very, very complex big ship that has to be steered.
Great. Thanks, Carolina. So let's talk about this, the funding and, what's the best way, to get the funding for the startups, either to buy solutions. Maybe we touched a little bit about the corporate venture capital. So let's start with Arvydas. I know you even have kind of a small arm with the investment as well. So what corporates, should think of, the best, way maybe to work with the startups and, thinking about the finance?
Someone mentioned that already, that one of the options would be to have this failure budget or this kind of POC budget, which you can spend as a company, as a corporate. If you don't have that one, so maybe you can have some kind of for example, we have agreement with Žalgiris, one basketball club. So EuroLeague kind of basketball association in Europe was ready to support them innovation journey, as long as we show the benefits. So, for them, it was a good combination as well. From also our experience, what we faced as well in even hackathons and later stages of cooperation, there are some VCs, and in Lithuania, it's also, and I think in all the world, B2B VCs who are ready to invest as long as we see even a letter of intent. So it means that, if a big corporate says that, yeah, we are ready to kind of work with that startup, it's already enough for quite a big kind of, not a big, but maybe, average size of ticket as well to be invested to that startup. And that's probably very normal, yeah, because what kind of, VCs are waiting from startups, so they're waiting traction. And this is the traction. So, this is probably the best way as well. So I guess that, these are the models at least we see in the market. Yeah. So probably that's, at least from our experience with our case.
Thank you, Arvydas. Remco, what's your take here?
Yeah, of course, it's a difficult thing, and it really depends on case by case structure, strategy, etc. I like the idea from small pivoting with POC budget. What I think is also relevant, and we touched upon that in the beginning, is what part of the organization are you talking with? Is it the strategic department, which also is involved with innovation, and they have a long-term goal, or is it the business unit with a small budget and they want solutions within 1 or 2 years? And maybe they are thinking more from a return on investment perspective, while others say, okay, this is more something that we see as an investment in R&D in the long term, and we're not too worried about not making profits on the short term. So I think that is something for a startup also to consider, who's your partner on the other side. And then, of course, as a corporate, we believe that small pilots work as a first step, and then in the next steps you can decide upon the terms and conditions for scaling further.
Great, thank you. Joni, do you see same things in the Helsinki field or some other takes?
Yes, the two most common ways of cooperating is, to start with the most common one, is that the corporation only buys the solution or buys the testing and experience that they get with cooperating with a startup. So there's no shares involved. And then the second most common is that they actually end up buying the startup, which is the CVC part that we probably touch more later. And they're both good ways. With the CVC part, or with the buying of a startup, it's a two-sided question. So both the corporation has to be wanting to buy and the owners have to be willing to sell. So it doesn't always happen that both want the same thing, but every startup wants to sell their product and every corporation wants to get the solution. So that's what we see most often.
Okay. So let's switch maybe to some questions from the audience. So we have the question, what are the most mistakes or loopholes when the startups and corporates start collaborating? So Itay, maybe you want to share your experience?
I need to talk in 2 hours for that, but I will say communication and lack of expectation. First of all, startups wants to say yes to everything, but in the end, when they come to deliver, there is, let's say, 40%. And the second it's happening, you're done, and the corporate won't gonna work with you. And it happened for that. I say so. Sometimes it's happening, and we talked about it when talking about what you have really, and what do you try to achieve. If there is a POC, what's the KPIs? It's communication. There is culture. Everybody said that startups want to run, corporates they have their time. It's like a mouse and an elephant, So they need to balance, their pace. And sometimes you're pushing too much. We saw some startups. We're putting a lot of efforts, to educate our startups. For example, how you do business in Japan and how you do business in Sweden. It's totally different. You don't send an email 5 minutes after the meeting was ended and okay, what's next? And it's happening still, and it's very rude. And you're not pushing, 2 emails a week. What's going on. It's Corona time, guys. Everybody in the shelters, so it's taking time. And so we try to help, and I see that Carolina is smiling because probably and others, we all suffer from the same things. But the mainly is to work with the startups, to adjust, the corporates. But sometimes also the corporates, need to have some translation, and somebody needs from the other side, to come and ask them, and to whisper them, why come, why it happened and why they are pushing that. And so yeah, this is it's, as I mentioned, it's a very long-term relationship with both sides, but mainly it's working with the startups to keep the pace slow down a little bit.
Great, thanks for that. Carolina, do you want to add on?
I just have to laugh so much. I think it's so hilarious being in a call with someone from Finland and someone from Israel, and that Itay from Israel mentioned exactly what I see as the biggest hurdle when it comes to Israeli startups, because their expectation setting is just, it's I mean, I'm generalizing. It's good examples, of course, but mostly they really overselling. Like, we have this and that and here and there, and you're like, okay, and where's that solution? Well, we still have to build it. What? So I had a few experiences with that, with Israeli startups. So yeah, their communication is really critical. On the other side, I was in conversations with Finnish startups, and they were so underselling. They were having the most greatest product in the world, and really they were far in their development, and they were so careful and like that. And there you have to do some translation as well. So this was just very funny now. But back to the question, what's the biggest mistake? I think I totally agree. I could talk for 2 hours about that. But I just, just the other day I heard a very nice statement, and that was, if you're a startup and you talk to the innovation department of a corporate, the thing that you want immediately is get out of this innovation department as soon as possible. So what do I mean with that? I mean with that you as a startup want to talk with the business units. You want to talk with the people that ultimately are your clients, that will apply your solution, that will scale your solution, and so on. And if you and innovation departments, if they, in my opinion, talking about the startup corporate collaboration thing, their job should be to get the startup as quickly as possible to navigate them to the right business unit and help the business unit to evaluate the startup. And if they don't do it, but they start with, oh, that's so cool, we should try something, and can you show me this, and can you show me that, and let's spend half a year on workshops, then this is a big mistake, because this is wasting money on the corporate side, it's wasting money on the startup side. And I think that is a big mistake that we also did in the beginning, that we were talking a lot with this innovation, very innovation guys that just wanted to try out things and never really implemented things.
Okay, great. Arvydas, so what do we stand here with the Lithuanian startups between the Israeli and Finnish startups, and what are the most common mistakes we see?
Maybe in between. I hope. Yeah. There are probably many situations. I can't agree more. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say that, yeah, that's two different worlds. I mean, startups and corporates. And from our experience, I mean, lack of moderation usually is what happens, why they fail. And, from one point of view, I agree with Caroline. From another point of view, I mean, what I also saw when, you're moving directly to business unit as a startup, and, for the business unit, maybe we have only one goal, kind of to develop one system, or even, we are not even for big corporates. And I worked also in a bank for big corporates, which is kind of scary for me now looking back, that, product owners sometimes are not related to P&L directly. So they are not interested to increase their sales. What they're interested to support product and to kind of make it reliable, make it legally kind of affordable, everything kind of from that sense, but not to sell more. So if, from startup point of view, you're going to a corporate and saying, oh, come on, we will develop this feature and you will sell more. And, product owner is not interested to sell more, but he sees many risks in that product. So that's, a crash already. So, it probably, that moderation and goal setting process is very critical. So from our point of view, usually what we start with corporate, with a, session with their top management to deliver kind of, to agree on the goals and on the expectations and on the areas where we want to innovate. And only then we're jumping to kind of, startups and saying, okay, guys, these are, the match we see. And then we can work forward. So without that, we see that if to move directly and say that, okay, we will connect you with some guys. So we don't see any success stories so far. Maybe we are not successful. So, but yeah.
Great, thanks. Remco, you wanna? Yeah, thanks. Remco, you wanna add on?
Yeah, I want to add one small thing is we organize yearly a startup conference. It's called the Global Meetup, where we have the winners from all our challenges and all our online competitions. We bring them together 2 or 3 days with corporates, with investors. And what you see is that during those 2 and 3 days, like those cultural differences, those change of attitude, then they come together and people will interact with each other, and then at some point you get at the same level with each one, and maybe with some others you don't, but then it's probably not a good collaboration. So we believe that take your time also for managing those expectations and understanding what the other side wants.
Great, thank you. So the time is running so fast, and I think we just keep carry on like for another hour or two. So let's switch to the last question. So can you share the most successful product or projects, which was the outcome of the corporate startup, the partnership? So maybe, Joni, let's start with you, and then we'll just round for everyone.
I'll have to think about this for a second, so I'll let somebody else answer.
Sure, no problem. Itay?
It's like a father, you can't choose with your kids. So let's say that I'm most proud of for that we at the moment, let's say pre-corona, we had 25 ongoing projects with corporates, and I think this is a unique number. And also what we saw in the last few years that Drive is 3 years old, and during the 3 years old we have a program called Fast Lane that we have now more than 40 companies. This is my kids. And now they raised more than $500 million so far from the day they started, and they meet us in Drive. So we are very honored to have them. And I just want to say that not only Israeli startups are exaggerating, sometimes. I saw some US also, but I know that we have a problem, and we are working on that. And I'm taking it seriously. So.
That's for sure. Thank you, Itay. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, everybody, I think we hear that, how the US startups just multiplies everything 10 times. Remco, what's your most successful, most memorable project you had?
I just recently called with one of our former corporate clients, or they're not really a corporate, but more a big SME company. And what he said is that due to one challenge that they did with us, they now started thinking within the company totally different about open innovation and the role that startups can play there. And they had a board with old angry men, I would say, and they totally had a new mindset because of collaborating with startups and all the ideas that they came up with. So that was the biggest compliment for me, is that by working with startups, that totally changed the idea of their future business models.
Wow, nice. That's incredible. Okay, Arvydas, do you have something?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's also hard to choose from, but probably no. I will choose one. So it was local real estate company, Itay, and then the chatbot company from Denmark, Bot Supply. And actually, I mean, it all started in the hackathon. And the interesting part was that, at least, I mean, the situation was hard because corporate didn't believe in chatbots in Lithuanian language. They had somehow understanding that it won't work. So, I mean, they agreed to take this team on the hackathon, but the idea was that probably they will not develop anything, so we're not a big believers, but okay, take them, they said to us. So, and we took it, and then during this 2 days, they managed to create a perfect demo together with Itay staff, I mean, the startup. Working together, we managed to create a perfect demo working on our language. And then we showed that to CEO of the company. He was amazed. And it only happened because 2 of them were cooperating these 2 days and made it together. And now it's working. So we started with a small project. So we implemented, and now we're working on a bigger one. So, this is the story probably to tell for others how, I mean, that partnership can be taken. So I chose this example this time.
Great experience. Great experience. Thanks, Arvydas. Carolina, do you have something to share as well?
Yes, I'm afraid I can't share my favorite example. Not yet. I can only say it's a BMW case, and it's an Israeli startup.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So and probably by latest next year I'll be able to tell about that. But this will go into serious development, and I think that's one of the most difficult things you can do in an automotive OEM, get into serious development as a startup. So this is my favorite project. And so I'd rather share a more recent example, which is for one of our clients, LH Startup Maker. So this construction materials company. And what I'm always amazed by the projects because of they're so international. So we are working with a startup from India, I think it was. It's called Lina AI. It's a HR chatbot solution. And they're doing projects with LH, Lafarge in South America. So they started with one country and now they are in several countries in South America. And what this startup did was they started a project in their normal HR chatbot functionalities, and then COVID came, and they were extremely fast in developing a new product, the HR COVID chatbot functionality. So people can ask anything about COVID and the situation in the company and so on, and they get automated replies by this chatbot. And I think this was just a very, very quick example of how startups with their pragmatic, fast approach can help to add value at such a big corporate.
Great, thank you, Rana. Joni, what's your project?
Yeah, sorry about the phone that I adjusted. I was trying to think of something that I'm less biased about, because I'm on the board of some startups, and I don't want to plug my own startups everywhere, but I couldn't think of a better one than this. So there was a startup. I wasn't on the board at that point, and on an advisory board. I just did my day job of introducing companies to each other. So I introduced one startup to one corporation. They exchanged a couple of emails. They had one meeting, and 2 months later, 1 month of summer holidays and 1 month of work, they were already doing a live pilot. And this is in relation to the contactless payments and car industry. So it might be something that we can discuss with the other panelists later. But some startups are really at the stage that they really know how to do the work with the corporations, and they have already what it takes for the corporation to start working with them in practice. And one big part about that is that the startups have a good advisory board. I wasn't on that point, so there's other people who helped them come there. And they had industry expertise already in their core team. So those are actually some things that some investors, like Icebreaker VC, they don't invest in any team that doesn't have industry experience already. So those are kind of the best cases I see. Industry experience, they know who to sell to, they know how to sell it to. So immediately, if somebody connects them with the right buyer, things get forward with the right foot.
Great. So thank you all for sharing all such a great experience. So maybe just for the last sentence, regarding the startup and corporate partnership. So Remco, let's start with you.
Oh, I would say to the audience, don't be afraid. Maybe don't be always like an Israeli startup, but be bold, be brave, and try your best, and don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Great. Thank you, Remco. Itay?
Yeah, great to be here.
Great, thank you, Remco. Itay?
I feel that the Israeli startups are under attack. But yeah, I agree with Remco. Don't put everything in one basket. We saw that companies, it's like, in the automotive, the mobility, there is a desert that you need to pass for a few years. Also, Carolina mentioned that. And you need also to come well-funded before, that you're not going to have finished your gas in the middle of the desert. So this is a long processing, and don't be afraid. I think now in this atmosphere, the ecosystem is much more. All the big corporates are much more open for the last few years. You can see that they are opening their own brands like Garage for BMW and others. And I think it's a great timing to be in the mobility. Very fascinating changes that are happening, and try to when you're coming to find a solution. First of all, let's see if there is a problem. Don't forget about the problem. Don't fall in love with the solution. Before there is a problem.
Great, thank you, Itay. And Carolina, what's your take?
I took my take. I also wanted to no, really, know what problem you solve on the startup side, know what problem you have on the corporate side, and adding to that, know your business case. Know the numbers? How much money do you save? How much money do you generate? And know these numbers, share these numbers. It can be the best argument in a conversation.
Great, thank you, Joni. Last word.
For the startups, to get expert help, to make sure you have industry experts on the board or in the core team. And for the corporations, it's really important to make sure that the incentives are aligned and things are organized so that you're able to take new business in. For example, Stora Enso is a good company to benchmark. Their business units, they have a rule that 15% of their turnover has to come from 3 years new contracts or 3 years new projects. So otherwise it might be so that the corporate business leaders, they benefit from doing something that doesn't help innovate the company forward.
Great examples. And Arvydas, last bit.
Yeah, everything is said already. Yeah, so just maybe a bit of repeat everything, but I guess the time is right, and for both corporates and startups to explore more on this field. And yeah, for corporates, probably it doesn't hurt to try. So try it, and you see the benefits. And if you don't like, you can come back to your regular approach. And for the startups, probably be braver here. I guess that in Lithuania, many of the startups are not even considering corporates here, but that could be a good playground. So check it.
Great. So thank you all for the panelists. I think I'm really excited about this panel. I think we can just carry on after the live session. But I would just encourage everybody, just get connected. There are so much knowledge and advices and expertise. We are all open, just to share wherever your startup or your corporate. We're happy to be in touch, and I think everybody enjoyed this this discussion. So once again, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.